Hello and welcome back to Resolutionary Leaders. I have Rachel Radway with me today, and she is an executive leadership coach, as well as a facilitator and a mentor and an author. And she is very tapped into women who are wired differently and helping them really thrive either in their workplace, or if they're not being allowed to thrive, or they're not feeling like they're thriving, finding ways to thrive and places to thrive. So welcome, and please tell us a little bit more about yourself, Rachel.
Thank you for having me, Helena. I'm really pleased to be here talking with you about this. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. So I spent a little bit more than 25 plus years in the corporate world, mainly in tech. I was also in a number of nonprofits and in a number of different roles, and I won't even go into all of them because there were a lot. Gradually moved up into leadership. I was a director in 4 different companies. And most of that time, I felt alone. I'd always known from when I was a small child that I was wired a little bit differently, that my brain didn't work the same way as other people around me. I knew things sometimes and I didn't really know how I knew them, but I just knew them, or I would see things differently or feel things differently. And a lot of the time I was told, oh, you're too sensitive, or you need to grow a thicker skin, or get over it. You just need to move on. And so many of us, we're programmed, women in our culture are programmed to just power through it and just do it, do what we need to do. And a number of things happened in the last 10 years or so that changed my course. So in 2014, I was a director of a global team at a global Fortune 500, and I got burned out at a time that nobody was talking about burnout. Now everybody is, but then I didn't even know what was happening to me. I just knew that I really was becoming non-functional, and that I had turned into a person personality-wise that I didn't like and didn't recognize. And it was really so bad that I understood that trying to get another job wasn't the answer. And so I ended up selling my home, quitting my job, and moving to rural Peru to give myself the space and time to recover. So
Wow.
that started a whole journey, as you can imagine, and a several-year sabbatical. I'll fast forward. We can go back in there and talk about some of that if you
We
like,
want
but
to talk about Peru and the 2-year sabbatical. I feel like that's probably a podcast episode on its own. So yes, let's.
there definitely might be. Anyway, fast forward several years, and I ended up back in tech where I hadn't been planning to go, but I needed a job.
Mm.
And then, of course, a couple of years later, I was laid off, and it was COVID, and we're still seeing that happen quite a bit now. I decided to do something that I had wanted to do for about 10 years, which was to get trained as a coach and to get my certification. So I did that, and I knew I wanted to work with women leaders. I didn't have a specific niche or a focus area at the time, but the journey that I've been on for the past year and a half or so has given me that area of specialization. So now I work with women who are, and I just call it wired a little differently, which can mean a lot of different things to different people, but I like the term because it's inclusive and it isn't a specific label. And we can talk about labels. I have a lot of thoughts on that. But women who are super smart, bright, creative, empathetic, talented, competent, tend to give 200% to everything they do, tend to care for everyone and everything else except themselves, and not learn how to prioritize self-care, and a lot of other things. And
And
so that's,
I just want to call that out and say, I'm sure people are listening, and there are a lot of women who are like putting their hand up. That just describe me. That is exactly who I am. And I want to go back to what you said about how you knew from a really young age that you were wired differently. That's amazing, because I've my journey, I will call myself wired differently. I will put myself in that same arena. And I just thought there was something wrong with me. That was where I went. What's wrong with me? Why can't I fit in like everybody else? Why do I keep getting shushed all the time? Why can't I keep my mouth shut?
yeah.
all those things. So the fact that you just embrace, oh, well, I'm different. I love it.
Well, so I love that you brought that up, Helena, because it is something that so many women that I talk to struggle with. And in 2020 hindsight, I can say I always knew I was wired differently. I didn't, I embraced some of it when I was a child, but I didn't have the language or the knowledge that I have now. And I definitely didn't have the self-compassion. I thought that I was weird. I thought that I was maybe not broken seriously, but I knew that I didn't fit in. And I knew that maybe this wasn't the planet that I was meant to be on. I was just different from everybody else. And it really breaks my heart when I talk to other women who say they were basically told that they were broken or crazy or weird, or I just, because we had moved so much when I was a child, I was already different for a lot of other reasons. And so I just embraced the difference, but I never stopped feeling alone. And it was just me.
And I think that our parents were of a different generation, would not have had the vocabulary even to
Right.
understand the access to all of the rest of the world through social media, to understand that your kid is, there's a bunch of kids like your kid or whatever it is, just because it's not the kids that are in your neighborhood. So I
Right.
think for our parents, yeah, how did your parents?
So my parents got divorced when I was very young. So my father wasn't around for most of my childhood. Also, I think we know now that when you have a child who's wired differently, chances are there's something in the family genetics where one of the parents or both of the parents are wired differently. So knowing what I know now and looking back at my family and my parents, I can see a lot of, we'll just call it different wiring in both sides of my family in different ways. My mom was always very independent, very strong. She was an attorney when there were not a lot of women attorneys. I mean, she
Wow.
went to law school in the late 60s, which was
Wow.
highly unusual.
Bless her.
And I think I want to say she had a pilot's license. She did a bunch of things that were not typical for women in that generation. So she always encouraged me to do what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
That said, I think that, and we haven't really talked about this. I don't know whether it's because she was concerned about me and how I would build a life being the way that I was, or didn't know what to do with me. There were definitely things. She made sure that I was able to go to an amazing arts camp during the summer. That was a huge influence on my life. And she made sure that I had access to things, even though we didn't have money. Um, I was able to get into programs and I went to an amazing high school. I don't know that she always knew what to do with me when I said things like very early, a very young age, I said, I don't want to work in an office when I grew up. And basically what I got was a pat on the head and you're just being ridiculous, Rachel. Of course you'll work in an office. What I realized just recently was when I said that, I didn't mean any office, obviously. What I meant was I don't want to work a traditional 9 to 5 corporate life. And I didn't have the language to say that at that time. I knew that about myself when I was a kid, but that's what you did. That's how you made a living. That's how you grew up and became an adult. So that's a little bit, I think there was always a tension between she was proud of me. She knew that I was talented. She knew that I was smart. She wanted to support me. She had always done things a little bit differently. And probably there was some concern about the world isn't made for kids like this or adults like this. So a desire to protect me. And I'm guessing, I don't want to put words in her mouth.
Okay. Okay, where were we going? You were on, I totally derailed you. Mainstream wiring.
Yeah. So we can dive in anywhere, actually. I was just doing my introduction.
Okay, so I'm still hung up on your mum being an attorney back in the 60s. And I can imagine she probably thought, this is personal. She's just, I'm busy, I'm out, I'm in the office. Rachel wants more of me, so she's blaming. Maybe that's what I thought when you said that.
Maybe. I know we've had pieces of conversations around things where, if, for example, I was trying to decide where to go to high school. I grew up in New York City. I was not from there originally, but that's where we lived at that time. And choices, you could go to a free public high school, which um, can be a little scary depending on where you are in New York.
Mhm.
Or you can pay to go to a school that you know is going to give you a good education. And again, we didn't have the money. I did take an exam that got me some scholarship offers at some of the local private schools. I really didn't like the feel of those schools. I didn't want to go there. So I ended up, she knew that I was bright and she knew that I would be bored if I went to someplace that didn't understand me and that didn't give me a chance to be engaged. So she actually found a smaller school that had an alternative type of curriculum that she was going to try to find a way to send me if I hadn't gotten into the school that I did get into. So she was aware.
I'm
Um,
don't hate me, but I loving your mom.
My mom is awesome.
Wow, like so, and then I'm just thinking she's a single mother. She's in New York City. She's a lawyer. Good Lord, she's so ahead of her time. Oh, I bet she felt alone too. I bet she felt alone.
I'm sure she did. I'm absolutely sure she did. And she didn't enjoy being a lawyer. She didn't like the way other lawyers, she didn't like the litigation part. That's not the kind of law she went into. She didn't like the fighting and that side of it. She's an artist. She's actually a painter. She's a very talented painter who has exhibited in many galleries and sold her work and does beautiful work. But
We're getting your mum on here with you. But anyway, I want to go. So I would like to talk about, just to don't want to sideline you, but
yeah,
let's just talk about what it looks like now. What it
yeah.
looks like now in today's work environment as a woman who's wired differently. How do you thrive? How do you, firstly, what does it look like? And then how do we empower ourselves to thrive in the environment?
I love those questions. So I'll start with what does it look like? Because it can look like a lot of different things and it can be called a lot of different things. And the first thing I want to say too is a lot of things don't require a diagnosis. Sometimes there is no diagnosis. It doesn't mean that there's anything broken or wrong, as we were saying before. The first thing I learned about myself was that I am highly sensitive. And there is a trait that it's said up to 30% of the population has that's called high sensitivity. I don't like that term because there is a stigma associated with being sensitive, especially in the corporate world, especially if you're a woman leader. I call it highly perceptive or having a trait called high sensory perception. And that can by itself look like a lot of different things. One very common piece of it, but not everyone who has the trait has this, is sensory sensitivities. I knew from a very early age, I was very sensitive to sound and loud noises. And I can't work when there is a lot of stuff going on around me. And when the landscapers come and they're like using all their power tools outside the window, literally, I want to climb walls. It drives me crazy.
When you're at a movie and there's someone sitting behind you chewing gum.
Or popcorn, or yes, I don't go to movie theaters because I can't. I would much rather curl up on my couch in front of Netflix. So sound is a big one for me. I happen to have a lot of them. So other ones include some people are very sensitive to lighting, different kinds of lighting, and it can give people migraines if it doesn't work well with them, or they just need natural light. Textures and clothing. I remember, so tags on the back of my shirts always bother me. When I was a teenager, I used to cut the necklines out of t-shirts all the time because I couldn't stand having something tight around my neck. Smells, scents are very powerful for some people, and we might notice things that other people around us don't notice. It could be a good smell or a bad smell, but if we're sensitive to it, it can really put us off or make us ill or affect us strongly. And other people might be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I have a lot of food sensitivities. I'm also very sensitive to caffeine and to alcohol, and that is fairly common in people with this trait. Other kinds, aside from the physical, the two main categories are emotional sensitivities and energetic. And again, people can have one or more or any combination of these at the same time. So I like to use the metaphor of a sound mixing board where it's got all of these little channels with dials that dial up and down. Exactly. We all have one. We're all on there somewhere, but all of our combinations look a little different. So mine might be sound and caffeine and alcohol, and somebody else's might be temperature, and they might need to have sound going on all the time around them. That's very common with a lot of people with ADHD, for example. So we all have that board, and it's just set differently for everybody. The emotional sensitivity can look like responding more strongly to things than people around you, again, positively or negatively. So we might be very moved by a fictional character in a book or a movie. We might deliberately stay away from violent movies or horror movies. We might over-identify with people in certain situations and just feel a lot. We might take things very personally that aren't meant personally, even if we know in our heads that they're not meant personally. And this can come up a lot at work
Oh
if
my,
decisions are made.
I'm just dying. You're just explaining me. And also my son. I have a child who is at all of this. All of
Mhm,
this. Feel a
mhm,
lot, over-identify, taking it personally, just that emotional sensitivity. And I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've got moments in my life that I look back and I remember watching a TV show where at like 13 years old, and some family had a child that they had to hand off in the middle room, like they were looking after it, and the mother came back. I was hysterical for about 48 hours about this. Something about it just touched me in a way. And
mhm,
the whole family, everyone's like, what is wrong with her? Like, what a crazy person. It's just a show. And then I just think about my child. I see how the world impacts him in
mhm,
a much deeper way,
mhm,
same situations. And I got 3 kids back to back. So it's very easy to see the difference in sensitivity. And they're all very sensitive, kind, whatever. But
mhm.
this kid, wow, he just feels it at a different
Yeah,
level.
yeah.
So yes, keep going because I'm
And
resonating.
it's
And
and another thing that I want to say that you just reminded me of is all of these things, they can feel like challenges when we don't know that other people have them, when we think it's just us, when we've got people around us who aren't particularly sensitive, who don't understand what's going on
calm
with us.
down, relax. You're okay. God, stop being so dramatic.
Exactly, exactly.
I
And
heard
we get programmed to believe that we're broken and it's a challenge. I want to emphasize that I consider these things superpowers. And a superpower doesn't necessarily mean you have a cape and can fly over tall buildings. It means there is something that you can do that not everyone can do and that you are really gifted at. And it has its flip side. So there is a challenge. I'm not going to wallpaper over that and say that there isn't and that we should just be grateful for it, because it can be really hard. And there are a lot of other traits that go with this.
Can I just say, and I'm interrupting, but I just want to say, I was working on a job a couple of days ago, and I was facilitating in a room of 14 people.
Mhm,
And I think this is my superpower. Like, this is exactly where my superpower belongs, is that I'm able to feel so deeply what that person is saying
mhm.
that I'm not a crier at all. But I will be sitting there listening to a story, and whether they're right or wrong, I can completely feel their experience. And I'll just start to, I'm like, shit, I'm starting to cry. And then, but it's so interesting because I, what they're saying might not be so dramatic, but I can feel how deeply it hit them.
Yeah.
And so just acknowledging that and saying, hey, that was so hard on you. And then saying to other people who maybe witnessed the situation, didn't really put too much, and saying, I just want you guys to hear how impactful that was. That's
Yes.
your experience. It doesn't make it you wrong and then, but that was her experience.
Yes.
And yeah.
It's so,
And
Helena,
in that moment, the person I was working with,
uh-huh.
I was like having a moment, and she's okay. So then and she just, and I was like, you can't go there yet. No, hang on. Like, stop, lean it back. We have to, anyway. So,
What you were talking about is it's one of the reasons that leaders who are highly perceptive, who have this trait, can be so admired and respected and can create such loyalty. So there are a lot of people who are afraid of empathy and afraid of showing it. There are people who have it who are afraid of showing it, and there are other people who don't have it who are just afraid of it because they don't believe that it's the way leaders need to be, and they don't believe that it's powerful. I think it's the opposite. I think it's incredibly powerful because don't you want a leader who can see you, who can hear you, who understands on a human level what it is that you're dealing with? And when you've got some, I'm just going to say it, middle-aged white man whose old style leadership does not allow for this,
Mhm.
how often do you feel heard or seen or valued in any way as a human being and not even as an employee,
Well,
right?
let's just say I definitely don't feel like I'm part of that tribe.
Exactly. And if you don't, then how easy is it for you to give everything you have to that company or that organization, right? So and that's just one piece of it. I totally, that's a superpower. I'm going to say, I bet you have others. And there are a lot of others that come with this trait as well. Some of the other ways, so we were talking about how do you recognize it? How do you know you're wired differently? So one of the things that's very common, and I'll explain a little bit about it in a second, but basically, a lot of us have an ability to connect the dots in addition to connecting people, but connecting dots and connecting information in a way that other people aren't, and seeing several steps ahead in a way that allows us to be strategic thinkers, to be able to see when a decision may not play out the way somebody thinks it's going to because of some other factors that they're not seeing right now. There's a woman that I know who calls this her Sherlock Holmes ability because her mind is always going on that path, steps ahead of where everybody else's is. And this can be a huge challenge. So for her, she has actually been passed up for jobs or feels that she has because of that, because people may think that she is like a know-it-all because she's always trying to solve problems.
Mhm.
I had a similar example in my own corporate life where I got a 360 review once that broke my heart because I was always recognized for my good work. That was not an issue. But I was told that people felt that I was trampling on their ideas. And that it made me cry because I am all about creativity and empathy and encouraging people. And when I heard that, I was just crushed and I didn't know what to do with it or how to change that perception. And it wasn't until basically about a year ago when I learned more about my brain and my wiring and, excuse me, how this works. I'm just going to take a sip.
Me too. Okay.
That I began to understand that not everybody does what I do. And when I can see several steps ahead, it doesn't mean that everybody else in that group can also see several steps ahead. So when I'm talking with somebody and their brain works different because all of our brains work differently, right? I may be following a particular path because my brain is pulling in certain kinds of information and I'm making connections. And they're not. They're just focused on the details. They're focused on right now, and this is my idea, and I love it, and I want to go forward with it. There's nothing wrong with either one of these two styles. Understanding that our brains are functioning and processing very differently helps me communicate in a very different way. What I was trying to do before was I was all about group success and a successful outcome. And because I move at a pretty rapid pace, I was just trying to move things forward. I wasn't trying to crush the idea. I just knew it wouldn't work. And so I wanted to move on,
Oh my
but I
God.
wasn't being very sensitive about it.
It's so crazy you're saying this. I actually spoke to a woman yesterday who just had the pulse survey, whatever, got all the feedback and broke her heart. And I think that is exactly what she was doing. I can see what needs to happen. Let's go. As
Yeah.
opposed to understanding that she needs to slow down and bring people along with her. Like, you're the leader now. you're leading a group. In your life, yes, you can, but as a leader, you're going to need to bring people along with you, and they're not all thinking the same way you're thinking.
So I lead executive roundtables. I host these free events. They're invitation only for small groups of women leaders who identify as being wired differently. I just hosted one yesterday, and this exact example came up. So there was a woman there who is an entrepreneur. She's the CEO of her company, and she is quick and bright and talented and passionate and extremely frustrated because she knows exactly what needs to happen. She sees the big picture and she sees the details. And what we don't always remember is not everyone can do that. That's another gift.
Mm.
She can also see several steps ahead. She knows what's not going to work. She's frustrated that her team won't just listen to her and go ahead and do what they need to do. And this is the conversation that we had yesterday, because she said, that really frustrates me when I have to give them the big picture. And I stopped her and I said, why does it frustrate you? And we talked about a whole, I won't go into all the details, but when we think, let me back up. When we don't think about it, it feels like, of course, we're all thinking the same thing, right? Why would we all be thinking differently? It feels like everyone can see the big picture as well as the details. By the end of the conversation, her perspective had entirely changed. And she realized that by bringing the big picture to everyone and communicating her vision and helping people understand where they all fit into it and how important their pieces were, then they could come along with her. But she was so far ahead before that step that they just felt like they were being given random directions and there was no particular reason and there was no alignment and they didn't get it. So it was really hard for them to buy in. And I think that's something so many of us struggle with because we're not taught these things.
We also have a workforce now that requires that. They're not going to just do it because you told them to do it.
True.
I think leadership in the past you're the leader, this is what we're doing, follow me. And didn't have, and the people that were thinking differently just kept quiet, sucked it up, and went along with the mainstream.
Or left.
Or left.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, you're right. And the problem is that some of those leaders are still around, and they're the leaders that most of us grew up under. So those were the examples that we had. So that's what we replicate when we become leaders ourselves, unless we have a mentor or a coach or experience to help us do differently.
I love the idea of your small entrepreneurial group of women, or not just entrepreneurs, but just
women leaders. Yeah. So I do this, I host free ones to introduce people to the concept. And I do those once or twice a month. And then I actually offer a mastermind that is an ongoing program. And I've been running them for corporate leaders, women in corporate, usually director and VP level. I would like to start doing them with entrepreneurs and business owners as well, but I haven't started doing that yet. And the idea is to create a community of these amazing women who often think that they are alone and often feel alone in their corporate environments, who are wired differently. A safe space in a small group environment where we meet twice a month for 8 months or so. And we share our challenges and we share our goals and we share our wins. And it's a hybrid mastermind and group coaching. So everybody contributes, everybody brings their vulnerability, their authentic selves. We develop trust and we all grow together, which is amazing and fulfilling and fun.
Whether you're a woman who is wired differently or not, I think one of the superpowers of being a woman is our ability to collaborate.
Yeah.
We just collaborate differently than men. And I don't want to, our brains, and I have a degree in physical therapy. I've seen brains. The area, the corpus callosum between the left brain and the right brain in a woman is just bigger. There's more wires that go back and forth. So we can go back and forth between being inclusive and collaborating and being like that. It's just, we're good like that, which is we're wired up like that because we were supposed to be taking care of all the children and cooking and doing all this. And the men were just supposed to be out there hunting the beast and bringing it back. One job. You've got one job, right? We had 50. Nothing's changed.
So funny.
But a man, it's changed.
Absolutely. No, it's really funny that you say that. When I launched my first cohort of my group program last year, I was doing some market research, and I went out and I talked to a whole bunch of women, all corporate women in leadership roles. Oh, hello.
Little baby digging a hole. I feel like just going
Look at those eyes. I also reached out to several men I knew who I thought might identify as being highly sensitive. And when we talked about the trait, they all fit. It all made sense to them.
Mm.
When I started talking to them about the frustrations and the challenges that they faced in their corporate role with this trait, what I got was very different from what I got from the women. They had the same challenges, but they responded to them differently, and there were different things that stood out for them. And they weren't particularly interested in the group program. They didn't feel that they wanted a community of other leaders like them. They just wanted to deal with the frustrations and move on. So that's why my program is women only, partially because I do know that we are wired differently, and I probably would have done one for women and one for men, but the men didn't want one. They just didn't have that same need for relating to other people with the same kinds of challenges. Or maybe they would prefer to do it one-on-one than in the group setting. So it's really interesting.
That is a whole nother piece that I don't, feel that educated to address. I think that there is so much need for men to have their community and create that for themselves. And I don't think that, I don't know, it's necessary. It's necessary. I've spoken to many men who they do feel really alone, but they don't quite know how to do it. It just isn't. And I don't know. So that's what I'm like, I can't speak to that.
Yeah. And it's not my area of expertise either. I have a few dear male friends that I talk to about this, and we're looking for slightly different things. So what I want to do is serve people. So I'm not going to try to force something that isn't there.
So on that note, one of the things that you're offering the audience is a 30-minute grace and grit session with you. Tell me about that.
Yes. So it's a laser coaching session. So typically my one-on-one coaching is an hour, and we can go more in depth and you have a whole engagement. But sometimes amazing insights can come from a quick session. And it's also a way to get to know a person and to even get to know a little bit about coaching if it's something you haven't experienced before. In coaching, in order to have any kind of transformation, which is usually the goal, it's all about the relationship between the client and the coach. There has to be trust. There has to be a real desire to change. I offer people a 30-minute, I call it Grace and Grit because my group program is called the Grit Collaborative, and GRIT is an acronym for grace, resilience, intuition, and trust, which are the 4 cornerstones of the program. And the grace part is it's something that I feel very deeply. It's very important to me. So Grace and Grit is just the name, but it's a laser coaching session. No obligation. It's free. We can use the time to focus on whatever topic they would like to explore. And if they decide that they want to pursue coaching and that's something that interests them, then we can talk about that. And if they just want to get some insight and explore a particular topic for half an hour, that's perfect. We can just do that too.
I might be signing up for a Grace and Grit session.
I would love to do a Grace and Grit session with you.
I have loved talking to you today. Thank you so much. It's just a really important conversation. It's an amazing perspective. And thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Helena. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that we could talk about. Yes.
Till next time.
Till next time.